Hi, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Roxy and this is my channel where I plan on making videos about my experience with long COVID, mental ill health and being a late diagnosed autistic adult. In my previous video, I talked a bit about how I experienced a sudden onset of dissociation and poor mental health after my initial COVID infection. In this video, I'll be explaining what non-epileptic seizures are and my experience of them. I first started having seizures after getting COVID. I had never had seizures before I had COVID, but in 2022 I started having seizures overnight. For me, my seizures came with a delayed onset of 5 months after my COVID infection, and apparently this is very common in the long COVID community where symptoms don't necessarily show up immediately, but they start later down the line. This made it very difficult for me to realise at the time what had triggered these seizures to occur. For me, seizures alongside dystonia have always been my worst symptoms since getting COVID. I have quite a lot to say about non-epileptic seizures and dystonia alongside all of my other strange neurological symptoms that I got after getting COVID, but I'm going to break it down into lots of videos. I have had genuinely thousands of seizures in the past almost 4 years since getting COVID. Sometimes, at my worst, I can have hundreds of seizures a day. Other times I can have no seizures in a day. I never know when I'm going to have a seizure, how long the seizure is going to go on for, and how long I'm going to cluster for. I have always personally experienced cluster seizures. Cluster seizures mean that I never just have one seizure. When I have seizures, I will cluster, and that means I go in and out of seizures for prolonged periods of time. And for me, I never know if I'm going to go in and out of seizures just for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 1 hour, or 10 hours. That's something I'll talk about in another video. So I'll start off by explaining what a non-epileptic seizure is. You may have heard of what an epileptic seizure is, but you may not have heard of what a non-epileptic seizure is. Admittedly, I hadn't heard of what a non-epileptic seizure was either until I started experiencing them. Non-epileptic seizures are still seizures. The cause of the seizure has not stemmed from epileptic activity in the brain. It might be due to a psychological cause, such as severe chronic stress or severe trauma. However, there can be physiological reasons for the seizure occurring also, such as low blood sugar and inflammation. And I don't think lots of people know about this, and that's why I'm quite passionate about talking about my experience of seizures, because I think, at least in my experience, when people hear the word non-epileptic seizure, that they immediately automatically assume that the seizure is as a result of poor mental health or stress. And although that can be the case for some people, I don't think it's necessarily as straightforward as that. Even for those individuals, I do think that there can be biological causes which could be contributing to their non-epileptic seizures, but science might not have figured it out yet. But at least in my case, my seizures are due to inflammation after getting COVID. Non-epileptic seizures are very real and both are very valid, whether it's come from a psychological reason or a biological reason. I think there will be a lot of people out there who are misdiagnosed with non-epileptic seizures and they're told that it's to do with their poor mental health. But I don't think that's necessarily the case for everybody. And I think a lot of people will be misdiagnosed out there. I think non-epileptic seizures are very misunderstood, even in the medical world. And I think there's a lot more research that needs to be done into them. I don't personally think that non-epileptic seizures are well understood. I don't personally think it's as black and white as someone's non-epileptic seizures are stemming from a biological cause or a psychiatric cause. I think when it comes to health, the mind and body are connected. And so someone's emotional state can definitely impact someone's physical health. I think we've all experienced that to some extent. When someone is stressed, their physical health might get worse. So if they experience a lot of headaches, their headaches might get worse when they're stressed. Or if they have digestive issues, it might get worse when they are stressed. Or if they have seizures, they might get worse when they are stressed. For me, my seizures do get worse when I'm stressed, but the cause of my seizures are not stress. I do think mind and body are connected, so I don't think it's as black and white as it's from someone's mental health or it's from someone's inflammation. I think with anything, things are connected, mentally and physically. Non-epileptic seizures often are more common in women. I'm not a doctor, nor am I a health professional, but in my opinion, I do think in many years to come, if there is more research done into non-epileptic seizures, I think with time, doctors and science will realise that non-epileptic seizures have been misunderstood and that actually there's more to it than these seizures being triggered because someone is stressed. So for those people who do have seizures as a result of psychological stress or trauma, although that can be the case for some people, in my opinion, there will be lots of people out there misdiagnosed and there could be biological causes for their non-epileptic seizures. Because it has not shown up on the EEG as epilepsy, lots of people are dismissed as their seizures being psychological, but there can be biological causes for them. You may hear of non-epileptic seizures being referred to as NEAD, which stands for non-epileptic attack disorder, or you may hear it referred to as a functional seizure or dissociative seizure. I personally do not like the term functional or dissociative seizure because to me, dissociative seizure implies that the seizure has stemmed from dissociation. Although that can be the case for some people, it's not the case for everybody. So I think the name is a little bit misleading. I also don't like the term functional seizure because my autistic brain takes things quite literally, and therefore someone describing a seizure as functional, in my opinion, the way my brain interprets that is as if the seizure is there serving some sort of function. But at least in my experience, my seizures serve me no function other than causing great inconvenience to my life. So I don't like the term functional seizure either. I personally just use the term non-epileptic seizure or seizure when referring to my seizures. There can be physiological causes for someone experiencing non-epileptic seizures, and I don't think this is spoken about enough. If you try to search about non-epileptic seizures, the vast majority of people talking about non-epileptic seizures are people saying that they're psychological, and that if the person focuses on decreasing their stress or working through their trauma, then the seizures might go away. But that's not necessarily the case for everybody. I guess the reason I'm so passionate about talking about non-epileptic seizures, or my experience of them, is because there are so many misconceptions about non-epileptic seizures, even in the medical world, and even by those who diagnose them. I started having seizures overnight in the October of 2022, approximately 5 months after my first COVID infection. We now know that my seizures have stemmed from COVID, but we didn't know that at the time. My health is very complex, and so I'm still trying to get to the root cause of all of my symptoms and why they present in the way that they do. But for me, there is a very clear link between histamine and my seizures. The presentation of non-epileptic seizures can vary greatly from person to person, so I can only explain and try to describe, and in future videos show what my non-epileptic seizures look like and how I experience them. But how I experience them and what my seizures look like doesn't mean that everyone with non-epileptic seizures will have seizures looking like mine or seizures that feel like mine, because everybody is different and there are so many different types of seizures that it's impossible to explain them all in one video. So you may be thinking, well, how do you know that your seizures are non-epileptic and not epilepsy? You can usually find out by doing an EEG recording. This will identify if there's any epileptic activity or not. An EEG is a test that's done where they place electrodes on the top of your head and they will try to trigger a seizure so that they can see what the brain activity is doing whilst the seizure is occurring. If there is epileptic activity whilst you're having a seizure when having an EEG, then they'll diagnose epilepsy. And if there is no epileptic activity whilst you're having a seizure when the EEG is done, then they'll diagnose non-epileptic seizures. But there will be people out there with epilepsy who find it difficult to get an epileptic diagnosis. It can be difficult to find out if someone has non-epileptic or epileptic seizures because sometimes they can look similar, and sometimes you may not always have a seizure whilst the EEG is being done. In my case, my first EEG was done in June 2023, and this showed no epileptic activity. My second EEG, which I had done in December 2024, I never got the result of. So I don't know if this showed any epileptic activity or not, but I assume it was clear. So you may be wondering, if someone has non-epileptic seizures, how do you know it's not because of their severe trauma? And how do you know it's to do with, say, an organic cause, such as inflammation or low blood sugar? You may be able to tell from the presentation of the seizure, but this can be difficult because it's not always clear from looking at someone's seizure whether or not it's to do with psychological distress or if it's to do with inflammation. But there are other ways you may be able to find out. In my case, it became quite obvious based on the presentation of my seizure that there was an organic cause, and also because I responded extremely well to antihistamines, mast cell stabilisers, and a low histamine and low oxalate diet. However, I have been repeatedly told by the neurologists under the NHS that my seizures are functional. However, I have seen 1 or 2 doctors privately who understand about inflammation and histamine, and based on my presentation of seizure and based on the fact that my seizures and other symptoms dramatically improve whilst taking antihistamines and mast cell stabilisers, as well as being on a low histamine or low oxalate diet, I understand that this is not due to psychological distress and that there is an organic cause to my symptoms. I'm not a doctor or a health professional, but just my personal opinion, and at least in my personal experience, I personally would strongly argue that if someone's severe neurological, neuropsychiatric or psychiatric symptoms dramatically reduce or disappear whilst taking antihistamines, mast cell stabilisers, or being on a low histamine diet, I personally would strongly argue that there is an organic cause to their symptoms and that this is not to do with psychological distress. So I guess that's one way you may be able to find out if someone's non-epileptic seizures are due to inflammation or psychological distress, because arguably if it was to do with someone's psychological distress, then taking antihistamines shouldn't make their seizures disappear. Unfortunately, there is a huge stigma about non-epileptic seizures, even in the medical world. When I have challenged the neurologists on my health and argued that this is to do with inflammation from COVID and not as a result of psychological distress, one doctor told me that they don't know what COVID is doing to people and therefore I should wait to see a neuropsychiatrist. Another said to me that they don't know anything about histamine and therefore I should see a neuropsychiatrist. But in my opinion at least, just because they don't know anything about histamine and just because doctors don't know enough about what COVID is doing to people yet, it doesn't mean that this is in my mind and that this is to do with my mental health. It just means that they don't understand about what COVID is doing to people's brains yet. It just means that that doctor didn't know enough about histamine and how that can trigger seizures. But just because that doctor didn't know about histamine doesn't mean that this is to do with my mental health. It just means that they don't have enough knowledge about that area of physiology. And that's okay, because they're human too. Doctors are human too, and so they can't know everything and they can't get everything right all of the time for everybody. And that's okay. And I guess that's why I'm so passionate about talking about my experience of them, because I imagine I'm not the only person to be misdiagnosed and I'm not the only person to be going through the symptoms that I am. And it might help someone out there if they found this video who might be going through something similar. Do I think that having therapy in general to support anybody's mental health is a good thing? Yes, I do. I do think therapy in general can help a lot of people with their mental health. But do I think that my severe neurological symptoms are going to go away when I talk to a therapist? No, no they're not. I have been in therapy my entire adult life and I've been in therapy whilst this is going on. Therapy isn't going to make my seizures go away, but therapy, I do believe, has a place in somebody's recovery. I do think when someone's mental health is better, then their physical health can get better. Do I think that therapy is going to cure my symptoms and seizures? No, absolutely not. But do I think that therapy is good for a lot of people to support their general well-being? Yes, I do think it has a part to play in someone's recovery and someone's well-being. But I don't believe that this is as straightforward as a cause and effect. And despite being in therapy all this time, my symptoms and seizures haven't gone away. However, do I believe that mind and body are connected? Yes. Do I believe that being a highly sensitive, highly traumatised individual with a very fragile nervous system before I got COVID, do I think that contributed as a risk factor to getting as sick as I did? Yes, I do. And I do think in general, people who are highly sensitive and who do have a history of trauma can be more likely to develop autoimmune health conditions in the future. I do believe that, yes. That's just my opinion. I'm not a doctor or a scientist, so I can't say what is true. I can only just say my opinion and also I think based on my own experiences. I do think being a highly sensitive, highly traumatised person was a risk factor, but I don't think that it was a direct cause for getting so sick, and I don't believe that my symptoms are psychological. And this will be obvious in future videos when I post footage of what I was looking like when I was very, very sick before taking any antihistamines, and then what I was looking like after I started taking antihistamines and mast cell stabilizers. I think people will be able to clearly see then the difference that antihistamines make in my recovery. For me personally, antihistamines only work for a maximum of 4 to 5 weeks before they stop working, but they work extremely well when I do take them. I'll post more about that in future videos, and I'll also be posting another video in the future about the possible reasons and risk factors I believe I had, which made me more susceptible to developing all of these neurological symptoms after getting COVID. I would also say that it is possible for someone to have both epilepsy and non-epileptic seizures. I was told when I first started having seizures that I might develop epilepsy in the future because of how many seizures I was having every single day. Apparently, it is not uncommon for someone to have both non-epileptic and epileptic seizures. To my knowledge so far, my seizures are non-epileptic, but quite honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if in the future I did go on to develop epilepsy. Hopefully not, but if it did happen, hypothetically, it wouldn't surprise me. I know a few people who are autistic, and all of them went on to develop either epileptic seizures and or non-epileptic seizures after getting a COVID infection. I don't know if research has been done on this yet or not, but there might be a link between neurodivergence, autism, and developing seizures after getting COVID. I think there is a link between autism and epilepsy, but I don't know if research has been done on neurodivergence and seizures after getting COVID. I think you are at a high risk of having seizures if you are on the autistic spectrum. I think that research has been done, but I don't know if it's the case. Talk of seizures. That's all I'm going to say in this video. I just had seizures. So, talking of seizures, just had a cluster of seizures and now I can't talk. I'm going to stop filming now. I think I was basically finished with what I was going to say anyway on this video. I'm going to post more videos about seizures in the future. If you're watching this video, don't know if anyone's actually watching these videos, but if you're watching this video, then feel free to like and subscribe, just like the YouTubers say. And see you in another video for more videos about seizures and long COVID. Okay, bye.